So in this video we're going to be looking at atypical sex chromosome patterns. And on your specification there's two types of conditions you need to know about. Klinefelters syndrome and Turner syndrome. So what we mean by atypical sex chromosome patterns is that not everybody has XX or XY chromosomes. Klinefelters syndrome affects males only. And you can see they will have a chromosomal makeup of XXY. Turner syndrome affects females, and this is where you have an absence of an X chromosome. So their genetic makeup would be X0. Okay, they have no second X chromosome. First one we're going to look at is Klinefelter syndrome, and this occurs in people who are biologically male. And they have the anatomical appearance of a male. So if you look at them, they look male. But they have an additional X chromosome. So their genetic makeup would be XXY. And 2/3 of people who have this condition are actually unaware of it. And they only usually get diagnosed when they go in to get something else checked. It might be they are struggling getting their wife pregnant. So they go in to be checked and they discover that they have this Klinefelter syndrome. The pictures on the side here show you what someone typically with Klinefelter syndrome would look like. They'd have reduced levels of body hair and they might have some breast development. If you think they've got an extra X chromosome in there, so they're going to look slightly more feminine. And because of that breast development, they're slightly more susceptible to things such as breast cancer. And similar to a female, they would have more rounding of their body contours. If you look at the picture down on the bottom right, their hips are slightly more curved, the waist slightly more curved, shoulders, arms, breasts, all those areas are slightly more rounded. And also they have underdeveloped genitals. Again, they've got that extra X chromosome that affects prenatal development of their genitals. And they also have problems with their coordination. Psychological characteristics include things like poor reading and language skills, which often characterises these individuals. They'll also be very passive and shy in themselves, and often they lack an interest in sexual activity. They might also have problems with things such as memory and problem-solving skills. So they've got different physical and psychological characteristics to a typical male. Turner syndrome, on the other hand, occurs in females, and this is the absence of one or two X chromosomes. They'll often be referred to as XO genetically. And because they're missing that last chromosome, they often have two chromosomes there. They might have 45 chromosomes instead of the usual 46. So physically, and you can see the two pictures here, they will differ to your typical or normal female. They don't have a menstrual cycle and their ovaries fail to develop. Remember, they've got that one less X chromosome, so it affects them physically and results in them being sterile. They're unable to have children. They don't develop breasts often and will be characterised by a flat, broad chest. Low set ears, if you look at the picture of the girl in the bottom right, her ears are slightly lower set than you would find on a normal woman. And they've also got a webbed neck. So the picture down on the bottom right and also at the top right there shows that clear webbing of their neck. And that's a key characteristic of Turner syndrome. And they also have a high hip to waist ratio. So women's hips usually go in and out, that sort of bell-shaped curve, whereas people with Turner syndrome, their hips and their waist are usually the same size. Okay, so there's no difference really between their hips and their waist. And overall, they generally have a very immature or prepubescent look. They look like a prepubescent girl. Psychologically, they also differ to typical females. They often have a higher reading ability, but much lower math ability. They're often socially immature and have trouble fitting in with their peers. And again, we'll have a little look, but that might be linked to how they look, rather than anything to do with the condition itself. So we're now going to have a look at the evaluation points for the atypical sex chromosome pattern. One of the key strengths of studying these individuals is that it adds to our understanding of the nature-nurture debate. So Overall, studying people with Klinefelters and Turner syndrome will contribute to our understanding of gender development. It allows us to compare their physiological, their psychological, and their behavioural characteristics to typical and normal females and males. And what this tells us really is that, from our current understanding, that nature has a real powerful effect on our psychology and our behaviour. Your genetic makeup can determine your physiology, your behaviour, and your psychology. Okay, so your genetic makeup is vital in gender development. We're going to have a little look at some environmental explanations now for these results. As we've already seen, we've mainly looked at the genetic reasons for the psychological, behavioural, physiological differences. But the main thing is we can't establish cause and effect, okay, because it might be due to social or environmental differences. For example, they might be treated differently. If you look at the woman with Turner syndrome, then they might be treated differently because they look different. They've got lower set ears, they've got the webbed neck. So that might be the reason why they can't fit in with their peers or they act immaturely. Okay, because one of the key features of Turner syndrome is social immaturity. But that might simply be because they're treated immaturely, because they look like prepubescent girls. They look young, so they're treated young. And maybe that's the reason why they're socially immature, rather than the biological reasons such as their genetic makeup. So there are practical applications to researching and understanding these particular syndromes. Research is far more likely to lead to earlier diagnosis, which will result in far more positive futures for people with Klinefelters and Turner syndrome. Australia, there was a very, very famous study in this particular area where they looked at 87 individuals with Klinefelters syndrome. And they found that those who were identified at a young age had significant benefit compared to those diagnosed in adulthood. So it's far better for every day-to-day living, dealing with the stresses of this syndrome, if it's diagnosed at a much earlier age. A major limitation to these studies, though, is that atypical individuals aren't representative of the general population. Those people with Klinefelters, with Turner syndrome, are an unrepresentative sample, which means it's very difficult to generalise these results to the wider population. In addition to that, 2/3 of the people don't even know that they've got the condition. So although we're studying these individuals, we're only studying a very small percentage of them, which obviously brings up issues of reliability and validity, because we don't know, even if those findings to that small percentage apply to the 2/3 of people who don't know they have the condition.